Welcome everyone. I'm Andrew Aiken, President and CEO here at the Palm Beach Zoo and Conservation Society. So it's definitely my pleasure to welcome you to our second lecture of the 2015 Conservation Leadership Lecture Series, presented by Bank of America, who we're very grateful to have behind us in this endeavor. We have from Bank of America, Stephanie Glavin and Lynn McLeod here tonight. Where are you guys? There we go. Stephanie has it. So thank you for that round of applause. I hope you saw the cocktail napkins with their name on it, because I thought that was really important to have that. But seriously, Bank of America is just a terrific organization that is very interested in educating people in general. Not that they educate us, but they want people to engage and talk and think about how we can make our community a better place, a stronger place, a place in which we support each other. So education even continues on when you're my age, our age, right? We continue to do things, and thanks to Bank of America, they're behind us in this leadership lecture series. It's hugely important. I think FPL, Florida Power and Light, is also Sue Park. Or Sue, are you here from FPL? No. There must be a power outage somewhere. Because Sue is constantly helping us with our own systems, and FPL is very much behind the renewable energy that we have here at the zoo. We've doubled the amount of renewable solar power that we're producing on site this past year, and we're working with FPL now. That's right, that's thanks to them. We're working with them now on a major new initiative in our parking lot. I can't tell you all the details, but I pretty much just did. And that's really going to be exciting for us going forward. We also have from the Florida Farm Bureau, Eva Webb is here. Where's Eva? All right. I didn't know too much about the Florida Farm Bureau. Eva. Until we got to know Dr. John Zahina-Ramos. And the Florida Farm Bureau does a terrific job of just talking about agriculture in general, how farmers work together, promoting the industry, and really, you know, we're talking about growing things out in the natural world, in the environment. You're talking about wildlife habitats out there. So we're interested in farming, how it gets done, and that's a lot about what we're going to talk about tonight. So, Dr. Z, all I can say is you better be on your game because Eva's here. We also have a couple of board members here. Bob Duncan from U.S. Trust. Bob, where are you? Thanks for being here. And we've got Tiffany Raylor. Tiffany's right here in the second row, which means I have to be on my game tonight with board members here, so that's great. So I'll leave the rest of the announcements for later on after our program, but typically what we'll do is we'll have our speaker will go for 40 minutes or so, and we'll have a good chance for question and answers at the end. But I just want to make a couple comments before we introduce Dr. Zahina-Ramos, and a couple things that come to mind in thinking about what we're going to talk about tonight in urban agriculture. And the first thing, you may think this makes absolutely no sense, but connecting with our community, feeling like you're part of something, feeling like you're part of a neighborhood. The last climate catastrophe we had that I can recall here in South Florida, I think it was 2006 maybe, and I'll forget the hurricane name, but we had a couple of hurricanes come through. How many people were here when that was going on? Okay. So you all remember, you don't remember, and that 2004, 5, Wilma, okay. All I can remember was, fortunately, you know, the roof of my house didn't blow off, but a lot of trees are down, power is out for a couple weeks. 6 weeks? Okay, 2 weeks on my street, 6 weeks, 6 weeks, that's a long time. But you know, one of the things that happened, I felt, in my community was, I felt like I got to know my neighbors a little better. I didn't have any electricity, so I was really dying to sleep in someone's, you know, kitchen who had air conditioning and a generator. And in my house, we had natural gas and a gas-fired hot water heater, which meant showers, which half our neighborhood didn't have. So people were going back and forth, and we were learning a lot about basic infrastructure and how things work, and it just was, I don't know, it was a wonderful thing. It kind of brought my neighborhood together, and it really started speaking to a sense of self-reliance. We could figure things out. in times that were tough, and we could work together and be part of a community. So that was sort of a climate catastrophe down here. And when you're thinking about wildlife conservation, what we do every day at the zoo, we're all talking about competing for resources, competing for habitat, right? Before us, it was just all wildlife. And so now we're building things, and we're needing space, and we need to grow food. We need to do all of that. And it means pressure on land, pressure on wildlife habitat at the end of the day. For a lot of those animals, they can live in our backyard or fly around our houses. But when you're talking about what we refer to at the zoo as a class 1 animal, an animal that can eat you, those apex predators can't really hang out in your backyard. It doesn't work very well. Or it doesn't work very long, from our perspective. So we're competing for their space, right? All over the planet. That's what's happening. As our population's growing, as us, the real apex predator is growing, we're pushing and taking wildlife habitat for any kind of thing we're doing. Build a hospital, build a school, build a church, build a house, grow some food. We're taking their space. So eventually, if we're going to grow and grow and grow, there is a limited amount of space on the planet. And since we can't really have apex predators in our backyard, they will eventually be pushed off the cliff edge of extinction unless we do something. Okay, so these issues about what we're doing and how we preserve, protect, how we act in our everyday lives that may help wildlife are the things that we're interested in talking about. So you may look at our conservation leadership lecture schedule this year and wonder, why are we talking about renewable energy? Why are we talking about growing food? Why are we talking about energy production, and what connection does that have to manatees? Just one small detail. I want everyone to know in this room, if you're here at the last lecture, or if you weren't here at the last lecture, what you missed was that Florida Power and Light has been the principal funder of all manatee research that's gone on in Florida, probably in the whole country. But the principal advancement of knowledge of manatees has happened because of our utility company. I'm pretty proud of that. So yeah, that's right. That's worth a round of applause. So we're competing for space, and every animal is under pressure. I was reading a book recently by a guy named Alex Epstein, a very bright guy. Wrote a book called The Moral Case for Fossil Fuel. Interesting topic, right? I thought that was something I had to read. I wanted to know what the moral case was. And Alex is kind of like, look, pressure? What pressure? What are we talking about? Climate change, global warming? Seriously? All the predictions that talked about record temperature increases have been false. They really haven't happened. All that's happened is the average temperature on the planet has gone up by, we can debate it here in this room, 1/2 to 3/4 of a degree. What are we talking about? What's the big deal? Well, I thought that was a pretty rational argument. I said, well, geez, maybe I ought to read more closely what's going on. So a friend gave me another excellent book from the other end of the spectrum called Climate Shock by a guy named Mark Shapiro. And Mark was talking about drastic change in the food production industry, particularly in California. And that was happening from the changes in climate, weather patterns, a little bit warmer temperatures for a much longer period of time, or cold snaps at very unusual points in time. And I was reading along, I was like, what kind of catastrophe are we talking about? Because when I last went to Publix, cucumbers were $1. Well, unless you buy the organic ones, they're $4. But they were $1 last year, $1 this year. It doesn't seem to be changing. When was the last time anyone in this room saw food prices quadruple? Right? It doesn't seem to be happening. So what's all this talk about climate catastrophe in the food industry? And what I learned was, if you look closely, the insurance industry really knows what's happening, because the insurance industry is profitable or non-existent by their ability to look at probabilities and statistics and figure out what's going on and make a good bet on the future. So the last time there was, or one of the biggest climate catastrophes in this country for agriculture, it was in the 1930s during the Dust Bowl in Oklahoma and Texas. Hundreds of thousands of families were wiped out from the farming industry. And that, we all probably got the 8th grade read Grapes of Wrath that we had to somehow get through, which I loved, by the way, but crop insurance was born out of that climate catastrophe. Today, the USDA runs that program, so we can buy a cucumber for $1. So there's been tremendous pressure on the food production business in this country, in California in particular, the payouts for crop insurance. Crop insurance is backed by all of us who pay federal taxes. Crop insurance payouts in 2010 were $4.3 billion, 2010. 2011, they were $10.8 billion. This covers farmers' losses. 2012, $17.3 billion. So things are happening out there, and I'm not really sure what they are, but we're all being covered by our federal government right now. Those things are getting smoothed over. But that might not last forever. And the possibility that we need to be prepared for some changes going forward, I think, is real. And so that brings us around to a topic like growing food in our own backyards, which I think is an incredibly interesting perspective. And this is the kind of thing we do with the zoo. We're constantly reading our local paper. I think it was going on 2 years ago. We read about Dr. John Zahina-Ramos's backyard. It was in the Palm Beach Post. We said, geez, we got to go find this fellow. So we heard that he was growing enough food to not only feed his whole family, but he was having like dinner parties for 20 people. And everybody was just eating whatever it was he was growing in his backyard. I said, good grief, he must have like 100 acres out there. So we called him up and we said, John, what do you do? Could we come over? So a group of us went over to his house, and it was like any other house in South Florida. Beautiful house. I didn't mean to say it was like. It's a beautiful house. But I was sure it was going to be a huge, expansive backyard with crops growing everywhere. What did he have? He had a backyard as big as this little space we're sitting in right here. But it was an incredible wildlife ecological habitat. In addition to growing food, there were all kinds of other things going on, which I don't want to steal his thunder. But it was fascinating, and I thought there was an awful lot to learn, and we should be sharing that with all of our visitors and guests. So that's why we're here tonight. So to introduce Dr. John Zahina-Ramos is, we're going to have one of the true superstars at the zoo. One of the opportunities we have with this leadership lecture series is to get the people on their feet who make a huge difference for this institution. We have a lot of rising stars. There are 82 to 100 people working at the zoo, depending on the time of year. But Cassie Klein is a lead education specialist for us. This is her 5th year here at the zoo. She's in her 5th year. She graduated from Delaware Valley College. Cum laude, of course. 2010. This is a smart gal with a BS in animal behavior. And frankly, she spends her time taking the zoo on the road. Taking animals out in a van to schools and places where people cannot either afford or cannot physically get to our institution. She's on the road a lot, and when she's not on the road, for 10 weeks in the summer, she's pretty much running our zoo camp program, which is 600 kids running around the zoo all summer in the 90+ degree heat. She has a Bachelor of Science degree in animal behavior to get that position of running our zoo camp. Anyway, she does a remarkable job. She's a true zoo star. She's been elected by her peers as one of the most positive thinking, influential employees that we have. She's an excellent instructor. She's certified in horseback riding instruction and archery as well, and my favorite, foil fencing. She's a team captain in high school in foil fencing, so not only is she a good teacher, but she's also dangerous. Anyway, Cassie Klein, a rising star at the Palm Beach Zoo, here to make the introductions. Cassie?
Thank you, Andrew, for that introduction. So welcome everybody. So glad that everyone is here tonight. It is my pleasure to introduce Dr. John Zahina-Ramos, affectionately known as Dr. Z, as a noted scientist who is at the forefront of research into the benefits of urban agriculture. He holds a Master's of Science degree in Biological Sciences and a PhD in Geosciences. His dissertation research was focused on the attitudes and perspectives of urban residents to home food growing. For more than 16 years, Dr. Z was a professional environmental scientist with the state of Florida and worked at Everglades Research with Duke University School of the Environment for 7 years. Dr. Z is currently an adjunct professor at Palm Beach State College, teaching courses in environmental mapping. He is the president of Casa Jardin Co, a consulting firm whose services are focused on urban agriculture and environmental issues, as well as an avid backyard food grower and founder of Just One Backyard web resource to promote the practice and sustainable food growing, particularly in cities. His latest book, Just One Backyard, One Man's Search for Food Sustainability, premiering tonight at our event. You can get it signed by him after our lecture. Chronicles changes from local food production to dependency on the industry, agricultural systems in place today. It also details the results of his 5-year backyard food growing study and documents the wide range of benefits that can be realized from sustainable urban food production. So please join me in welcoming up Dr. Z.
Thank you so very, very much. Can you hear me all the way in the back?
Yes.
Thanks, good. So those of you up front, maybe move your earphones or something. There's some extra napkins out at the bar over there. A little side note, yes, I'm the speaker, the gentleman that looks like a waiter and server. Those of you who have drinks for you earlier. A little bit of surprise there, huh? My spouse and I did have a discussion about whether to wear white or gray shirt, and the white won out at the risk of being asked to serve drinks. So, it is both a privilege and a pleasure to be in front of you tonight. I really do appreciate the opportunity and how wonderful it is to have people who are interested in the same things that I'm interested in, and we can have a nice discussion. So thank you for coming. I am from a farm family. I come from a farming or agricultural background. I myself am not a farmer. I'm an urban agriculturalist. But my grandfather was born, believe it or not, over 150 years ago in Germany and immigrated to this country and homesteaded 160 acres of Iowa prairie in northeastern Iowa. And my mother was born on the farm almost 100 years ago. And she would gather us up as children when I was younger and put us into the car. We would have usually a large Cadillac sedan or something, or a station wagon, and out we would go to the country, to the old homestead, and we would do a little visiting, but you know what? We mostly went out to vegetable garden. We did a vegetable garden in our backyard in the city, but we also had a very large plot out on the homestead so that we could grow fruits and vegetables for ourselves. I was born and raised on local food. And by the time I was 20 years old, I had completely transitioned to dependency on food from supermarkets. So this long generational span of years that I have in my family, from my grandfather to my parents to myself, we saw the profound changes that had occurred in this country in terms of agricultural production and in terms of the loss of natural habitat. When my grandfather homesteaded his piece of land, the great American prairie in the Midwest was still pretty much intact. The buffalo were gone by then, the bison, but the prairie was still there. By the time my mother was born, the prairie was mostly gone, and so very little of it remained, and she probably never saw any of it. So by the time I came around, we had started to switch from local foods over to dependency on supermarket foods, which travel an estimated average of 1,400 miles per product. So I started my dissertation, my doctoral program some years back, and I originally started in the field of environmental restoration and biogeography. Biogeography is the study of why plants and animals are where they are, why they live where they live. And after a year and a half in the program, I decided to make a change. Because quite honestly, environmental restoration and biogeography, I had been doing that professionally for almost 20 years. And by that time, it wasn't exciting. I had been doing it and there wasn't a whole lot new to be learned. So I switched over to urban agriculture. And as I got deeper into urban agriculture in my doctoral degree, I found out that the two were almost inseparable. Never thought about that before. So that's the theme of my talk this evening. So as I mentioned, in the 20th century, there's been a profound change in agriculture and population in this country. Those two things, particularly after 1950, after World War II. And one of the changes in agriculture in particular was that it became industrialized. The industrialized agriculture system came out of the Industrial Revolution of the 1800s. Mechanization, mass production, and high-intensity farming. Those were all born out of the Industrial Revolution, and they became widespread practices starting about the 1950s, where you have a field that's densely planted in just one crop type. That was pretty much unheard of before then. That was a new invention. And along with that came the movement of agriculture out into rural areas, because before that, agriculture was mostly an activity that occurred around cities, believe it or not. So looking at this diagram here, I'm going to skip you over to this side so you can read the legend over here, the key. So imagine this to be an area, and the green area to be natural habitat, natural land, and these orange areas, which look a little yellow to you there perhaps, consider those to be cities. And before about 1900, and all the way back to the beginning of human settlements, agriculture was pretty much around the city. And these were called market farms. They produced local agriculture that fed into the city. And they would literally take these by ox cart into the city and sell them their products every single day. And then people stored things over the winter. And this was how agriculture and how our food system was up until about 1900. And then things started to change. With the explosion in population that occurred particularly during the mid-1900s, our cities grew profoundly, and what they did is that they built over the top of the local agricultural lands that were there. They took them over and built on top of them, and displaced agriculture out into the rural areas, along with government subsidies that encouraged rural agriculture development. And so we ended up with this kind of situation today where we have cities that are separated from where our food growing areas are, and our food growing areas are mostly out in rural areas. And you see the shrinkage of natural habitat that has happened because of the expansion of human settlement over the last century. In some areas, we've lost so much wildlife habitat that there are now species threatened with extinction because of that. And if you want to meet some of these, I'll show them to you. And some of them are right here outside our window. We have the Siamang gibbon, this rather gregarious primate, native to the forests of Malaysia, Thailand, and Sumatra. Important part of the forest ecology. It's very difficult to separate an animal out of the forest ecology because they're so integrated. They perform certain things within the environment that no one else does. And so when you remove them from the environment, or they become lost from the environment, the ecology actually changes because of their absence. Habitat loss is a major threat to this species, conversion of land to agriculture for humans, illegal logging, and encroachment of human development. And this is going to become more of a broken record as I keep going through here. The golden lion tamarin, same thing. Native to the coastal forest of Brazil, beautiful animal. Mutual interaction between 96 species of plants. And what mutualistic interaction means is that this guy here eats the seeds of things and then carries the seeds off maybe 1, 2, 3, 4 miles down and drops them. And so this species may be responsible for transporting and planting seeds of a tree or shrubs in other parts of the forest, and so the tree would normally not be able to distribute itself around the forest. 96 species of plants, those kinds of interactions with this animal. So you can see that if we lose this animal from the forest, it could be catastrophic to the forest itself. It's endangered, and it's endangered because roughly 2 to 5% of its original habitat still remains. Another species, the ring-tailed lemur. Beautiful and rather interesting coloration. Madagascar, endangered status to habitat loss. Madagascar has lost about 90% of its native forest, which this thing likes to live in. Profound losses. The Mexican spider monkey, a little closer to home here, south of the border. Mexico and Central America, relies on fruit, flowers, and seeds for food, but if you cut those trees down and those species have to go away, you're left with a critically endangered species because of habitat loss. Cotton-top tamarin, tropical forest of northwest Colombia. Important seed disperser, so this plays a very important role in the forest ecology, as these other species have. Critically endangered because of large-scale habitat destruction. 5% of the original habitat remains. A little closer to home now, right here in Florida. Originally, when the Europeans arrived, more than half of the area of the state of Florida was covered in lakes and wetlands. By 1980s, 9.3 million acres of wetlands in the state of Florida had been lost. It's about 1 acre per resident as of the 1980s population. Where this used to be all natural habitat, the white area is no longer white, is no longer completely functioning wildlife habitat. In some cases, it's only partially functional, but these are mostly settled lands, agricultural lands. And so our preserves are shown here in these colors, semi-protected, multiple use, and other things. So, of course, we're going to have some species that are not doing so well. In the United States in general, and this is going to knock you on your feet, this is back in my native Iowa homeland. Bison numbered 60 million when the first European settlers arrived. By 1890, there were only 750 known to exist in scattered herds. The Great North American Prairie that this 60 million bison lived on once covered 545 million acres. And here's the extent of it, basically going from the state of Illinois out to the Rocky Mountains. Unfortunately, only a few percent of the original area of tallgrass prairie is even still in existence. All of this occurred over the span of one single generation, which is phenomenal. Sometimes we lose habitat because it's generally nibbled away, but in these cases, these were widespread changes that happened very quickly. This is just some of the remnant tallgrass prairie that still remains, whereas this went all the way up to Canada, and it's all been gone, it's all been lost. Oh, sorry about that. The prairie contained an enormous biodiversity. Look at this, more than 475 species of birds, more than 20,000 species of invertebrates, more than 800 species of herbaceous flowering plants, and more than 90 species of mammals. It was a virtual Serengeti Plains, and most of it's gone. But to put this in perspective, in Brazil, the tropical rainforest, remember the outcry over the tropical rainforest the last decades, and the concerns worldwide. Between 1990 and 2005, every year, 11,500 square miles of Brazil's tropical forest was taken down. But to put this in perspective, at that rate, it would have taken more than a half century to even start to approach the amount of habitat loss that we lost with the Great American Prairie. Other ecosystems have been heavily impacted. The rate of wetland loss in North America has been profound. From 1780 until 1980, we lost an average of 1 acre per minute. It's just staggering. So So there's no wonder that we have species that are threatened and endangered of extinction, especially those that are dependent on these kinds of habitats. So, but humans need places to live too. We have basic necessities. We need clean water, we need clean air, we need shelter, we need healthy food. And for the first time in the history of this planet, there are now more people living in urbanized areas than there are people living in rural areas, which has had a profound impact on people themselves. Today, very little of the food that is consumed by urban residents has been grown locally. The majority of it has traveled an average of 1,400 miles to get to you in the grocery store. That's an awful long way, and there's a lot of energy consumption associated with that. And as population grows and people start to move into cities more, because that's the trend, and the population grows, more land is going to be required to grow more food. How are we going to feed these additional people? The ecological footprint of cities is a concept that has been studied by scientists in the last decade or two. An ecological footprint is the amount of ecological resources or the amount of ecological damage that occurs because the residents of the city don't produce their own food, they don't produce their own water, they don't produce their own lumber to build their houses, they don't produce their own resources with which to survive. So they have to get those resources from somewhere else. And when you take those resources from somewhere else, then there's impact deferred from the urban landscape off to another place. So one ecological impact of cities is that you lose habitat when the urban area itself is constructed. So everywhere where we have city today, that was historically urban habitat at one time. And then when you construct the city, you have to have raw materials, wood for building and concrete and all kinds of things to build that city. When you have to go out into the natural environment and you have to extract those resources, that further damages habitat, or we lose habitat because of that. And then we lose more habitat again when we have put all of our food production in rural areas, because everywhere where there's a farm field, that truly used to be natural habitat. So when you start to add these up, the common denominator is habitat loss. And as I mentioned before, wildlife habitat needs wildlife. The species that live there, particularly the larger animals, have important ecological significance to maintaining that habitat intact. You can't really lose them. And natural lands are much, much more than wildlife habitat. We oftentimes just see them as places where there's, birds and bunnies and bees. But the fact of the matter is that they provide something called goods and services. Human life and welfare are very much dependent on the goods and services that natural lands provide to us. And some of these goods and services include things like clean air. Natural lands cleanse the air that we breathe. Natural lands cleanse the water that we drink. How many people here live in the city of West Palm Beach? Do you know that your drinking water comes out of a wetland? It's captured rainfall. And so your water comes out of the natural environment. And one reason that it's clean is because it's coming from the environment and it's clean. It's cleansed by the wetland. Wetlands and other natural areas recharge our groundwater supplies, and we withdraw that water through wells for our drinking water for many municipalities. So our water resources. And these natural areas have a really significant amount of wild food available in them. And they also have a lot of extractable products. And we're very familiar with the extractable products, lumber and things like that, but we don't often think a lot of the wild foods. When you think about it, the Native Americans didn't send out for seed catalogs. They didn't go to grocery stores. They knew the foods, the wild foods that were around them. And we've largely forgotten them today, and we don't eat them, and we don't use them. And that's a shame, because we consider our wild lands as being places that don't produce food for us, when in fact they produce food, we just don't recognize it. So we have a real conflict going on here. We have a rise in human population, and as the human population expands, it destroys natural habitat, because you have to build a city. And the ecological footprint of cities further degrades natural lands outside the city. And when we use natural lands, it reduces the environmental goods and services that we rely on, the clean water, the clean air, and the extractable resources. And those extractable resources can be extracted sustainably. And by sustainably, that means they can be taken forever, perpetually out of the system, as long as they're taken in small and sustainable quantities. You can continually harvest it and not deplete the resource because it's renewing them at a rate that's faster than the rate you're taking it out of. So it's actually a win-win. It also, we lose wildlife habitat when we lose natural lands, obviously. And in some places, here's the real rub. All the land's been claimed. It's all been divided up. Here's the preserves, here's the state parks, here's the national parks, here's our urban area, and here's our agricultural areas. It's all cut up and sliced and diced up. So what happens when our urban area grows? We lose something. What do? Now what? This is a chart of human population on Earth from the UN. This is 1940. And the population going back to the mid to early 1800s up to 1940 was a very slow and gradual increase in population. And starting about 1950, the rate of increase has gone up enormously. Here we are today, and it's projected to continue. And we will essentially double the population on Earth by around 2080. There are other scenarios: mass poverty, mass disease, or natural disasters that kill an awful lot of people could decline population, or it may level off for whatever reason. But this is the one that's most concerning because it appears that's the trajectory we're on. And it's on our doorstep. It has been happening and continues to happen. Between 2010 and 2050, the UN predicts that the Earth's population will increase by 2 billion people, concentrated mostly in Africa and Asia. So how many people is that? 2 billion people is the amount of people that was living on Earth in 1950. So those of you who were around in 1950, just think of doubling, of taking all that population and adding it again onto the face of the Earth. And you start to see what we're up against here. Between 2000 and 2040, the extent of urbanized area on Earth is expected to triple what it currently is. That amount of land is roughly equivalent to the size of the continent of Africa. This amount of urbanization is going to impact the resources that humanity depends upon. And with so many species already on the brink of extinction and threatened with extinction, can we really stand to lose that much natural habitat? Urban growth so far, the impacts of urbanization of our expanding human population, has already profoundly impacted biodiversity on this Earth, has already impacted natural habitat, and the ecosystem services that we desperately depend on to keep our environment healthy and clean and safe. And the coming urban expansion over the next decades will come at the expense of natural resources. And it's going to consume prime farmland, as it always has, because prime farmland is local, and the first thing that's built over as the city grows out is usually the farmland. And it's going to impact biodiversity significantly. Rapid urban expansion is occurring in areas that are hotspots of biodiversity. And all of that population growth in the next 20, 30 years is projected to occur in the areas that are hotspots of biodiversity. And the problem is these same regions are the least able and capable of protecting the resources. We can create preserves, and we have created preserves, but sometimes preserves aren't enough. Poaching for large mammals or large animals that have desirable products associated with them, such as ivory. Fragmented habitat is often inadequate. If our preserves, our fragmented habitat, for the long period of sustainability, they may not be enough. Habitat change due to climate change may be an issue. If you have a preserve and you have your animals all confined to a preserve and the climate changes, then that habitat's going to change and it may not be suitable for that animal anymore. And it can't migrate to a new place because there's no place for it to go. And the competition for land between urban agriculture and natural land preservation is in some places becoming an issue. And as these expand, this land gets more expensive to purchase for preservation. And for some species, we really can't purchase enough land to fully recover or ensure the viability of that species. Think of the Florida panther. We can't buy enough and preserve enough land to preserve that species. We have to use other creative solutions to do that. Today's problem, well, local farmland is being lost to urban expansion, and it's driving food production further out into rural areas. When you create new agricultural lands from natural lands, well, that's unsustainable because we're losing natural habitat. Kind of a vicious circle. But the extent of agricultural lands has to increase to feed these 2 billion more people that are coming on the planet. So what do? Other issues besides that include the use of non-renewable energy sources, carbon dioxide emissions, nutrient depletion. There's only so much calcium phosphate to be mined on the planet, and once it's gone, it's gone. That's for growing our food. Pollution and unsustainable use of our resources. So one thing is maybe we can slow down the expansion of farms, right? If we get them more efficient, maybe we don't need to have so much more farmland out in rural areas and create so much more new farms to feed all the people that are coming. Which brings this question to us, can humanity feed itself in the existing set of land and farms without expanding, and can we feed our additional population growth? Well, maybe, but I think in many cases we've already hit the plateau. We have intensified agriculture as far as we can intensify it. We may have a little bit more tweaking that we can do, but for the most part, we can't cram any more corn plants or soybean plants into an acre than we currently are. And we have caps on how much fertilizer we can use because of its adverse impacts to the environment if we overdo it. So there's limits on how far we can go with that. But one thing's for sure is that we have to use sustainable and environmentally friendly farm practices. They absolutely have to be. And there's good news on that front. An outstanding example is the Florida Farm Bureau's CARES program. Many farmers in the central part of the state participate in this program. What they do is recognize farmers who are instrumental in using sustainable and environmentally compatible agricultural practices for the sake of protecting both Florida's unique environment and protecting its agriculture. Well, so that's a step forward. So what about our cities? If we can keep our cities from outgrowing themselves and keep taking more land over, maybe that could be something we could work on. Well, so beyond the farm field, regional and urban planners are working on that kind of thing. They've come up with different kinds of urban development models to make land use in cities more efficient and more compact. And all modern urban designs think about these things when they plan a neighborhood or they plan a development. They think about security and aesthetics and shopping and community interaction. But interestingly, without failure, they never think about food production. One of the basic necessities of human beings is to have clean and healthy food, and yet we build our communities with clean, breathable air, and clean housing, and all these other things, but we never include agriculture and food growing within our communities. We expect the residents to be dependent on an agricultural system that's commercialized and where you have to go to a commercial outlet to get food. You can't grow it yourself in your own community because it's been excluded, in some places particularly. So what about growing food in cities? One thing about urban agriculture, growing food in cities, whether it's a backyard garden or a wall garden or an actual urban farm, one thing about it is that directly reduces the need to create more agricultural land outside the urban footprint to support more population. Simply put, it is a solution to that very, very burning problem of growing population but not being able to grow enough food within the existing footprint to meet that demand. There's some real good precedents for urban agriculture. Well, first off, it was widely practiced in the United States until the 1900s with the advent of our modern food systems. The Victory Gardens, which some of you have parents that remember, was very successful during World War II. In Kenya and Tanzania, believe it or not, 2 out of 3 urban families are farming families in the city. In Taiwan, half of urban families belong to farming associations, urban farming associations. There are more urban farmers than rural farmers in the countries of Chile, in Japan, Chile, and the Netherlands. So this is not without precedence, even in modern times. Cuba, after the Soviet Union dissolved, and Cuba lost its agricultural supports, primarily fertilizers and other petroleum products that were getting from USSR, they turned their government and their agricultural universities onto the task of producing all the products they need using organic methods on the island. And today, the city of Havana, a city of more than 2.2 million people, feeds itself from urban agriculture and from farms within a 30-mile radius of Havana. Virtually all the food for that city is grown locally and produced locally using organic methods. So it can be done. One thing about urban ag is it's very, very different from commercial and rural agriculture in its practice and its purpose. It's strikingly different. It's the most efficient kind of agriculture that there is. And it's going to surprise people, but urban agriculture is much more productive per square foot area than rural agriculture. But can enough be grown in a metropolitan area to really make a difference? So let's get down to it. If you can't grow enough in a metropolitan area, then all of this is just a lot of nice talk. So do we have the space, first off? Well, green space in cities is the largest land cover type in cities. Green space, empty lots, lawns, landscaping, you get what I mean? The places where there isn't pavement and buildings. That's the largest area of wetlands. And this is a fun one. The extent of lawns in the United States as of 2005 was 49,000 square miles. That is more than the combined areas of the states of Hawaii, Washington, D.C., Delaware, New Jersey, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Vermont, and New Hampshire combined. When you think about eliminating all the natural habitat in these states and planting it with grass, this is exactly what we have done as human beings. There are 7 times more area of lawn in this country than there are vegetable farms. 7-to-1 ratio. It was estimated in 2010 that the U.S. needed 13 million more acres of vegetable farms to be able to feed all of its population with a proper diet as defined by the USDA. This can be accomplished by turning less than 1/3 of our lawns into food gardens. Urban food gardens have already contributed to our nation's food supply. This is not without precedence. During World War II, we had 34 million victory gardens within our cities in the United States, and that met half of our nation's food supply. We've done this before. The government got behind it because they recognized how much this saved our natural resources. It was important and a priority. Unfortunately, after the war, it was lost. What if these were put back into production? Can we grow enough? Well, I embarked on a research study, and I think Andrew mentioned this. I turned my backyard food garden into a long-term research study. How much can you grow? Is it worth it financially, environmentally, ecologically? The results that I got from that 5-year study, it wrapped up, by the way, last August, and the results of it and the whole story behind it are in my book. And it's a rather long journey because it starts when I think I was 6 or 7 years old digging carrots up in my parents' yard. So anyway, I'm just, suffice to say I'm middle-aged, so there's a long time there. But I use that to calculate how much we can produce in an urban backyard food garden. And I looked at the metropolitan area in Palm Beach County and saw how much space we had there in our residential backyards. And when I say residential backyards, I mean you can't see these gardens from the front yard. Heavens forbid we should spoil the aesthetics of our neighborhoods and somebody should see a carrot plant, okay? So I only looked at areas that were hidden away in the backyards of our residential areas in Palm Beach County. And voila, when I added those areas up and I looked at how much I was able to grow out of my garden and extrapolated, calculated how much you could grow in Palm Beach County, well, it turns out that we can grow enough fruits and vegetables just in our residential green space to feed every single resident of Palm Beach County with a healthy diet according to the USDA guidelines for fruit and vegetable intake. 5 types of vegetables: green leafies, orange and red vegetables, starchy vegetables, so on and so forth. That's pretty amazing. And I used organic methods. And I recycled waste materials. Something you can't necessarily do with rural agriculture. Will people grow food for themselves? Well, maybe not. Maybe so. If people won't grow food for themselves, well, then this is all a waste of time and we should just go home. And I'll end the presentation right now. I'm getting some stares. It looks like, oh yeah, you're just joking, move on. So I did a survey of the local community, and I asked them that very question, almost 300 people. 56% of the people in the community said they were already growing food for themselves. That's a pretty good amount. Of the remaining 44%, almost half said they were really interested in gardening and it was something that they would do. Less than 15% said they really weren't interested. That leaves with about 85% of the people to work with. Not bad, right? When you think about it, people are already voluntarily growing a lot of lawn and a lot of landscape, and they're using a lot of water and fertilizer and time and money and effort to do that, to get absolutely nothing out of it other than grass. People are also recycling. They're voluntarily separating things out of their trash and setting them out for pickup. So people do things because, well, I can't speak to this because I don't have this, but people seem to do things if you just tell them that it's a good thing and they see that it's a good thing to do. So maybe there's more receptivity here than most people would give us credit for. But I did ask these people in the survey about how much they spent a year and how much time they spent. $1,200 a year to grow grass and landscaping, and average 9 hours a month on maintenance. Now, growing your own food is not for everybody. There are some people who are not physically able to do so. There are some people who just don't want to, and there are some people who are too busy. Let the landscape companies do that. We're already paying them to come cut our grass. Why can't they do our vegetable garden for us? And we get the food, and we might actually harvest enough of that food to pay for their services. It works. This is the good stuff. Was that 5 minutes or was that below? Okay.
Just below.
Hi. If 5% of Palm Beach County's residents, I did data to prove this, it's in my book. If 5% of Palm Beach County's residents grew a 1,000 square foot garden, that's what I got in my backyard, the annual economic impact to us would be $130 to $195 million a year. Where are we going to get that kind of economic impact from anywhere else? When I looked at the amount of available space in residential communities, it was about 5.1% of the urban area was available to grow food in, and you wouldn't even see it. It was hidden away. This does not include church areas, lots, properties. This doesn't include multi-family housing. This doesn't include places like empty lots and institutions where you do have larger significant parts of properties. If you were able to put those in, you would increase this up beyond that. Looking at this 5.1%, and then looking at all of Florida's metropolitan areas, Orlando, St. Petersburg, Tampa, Southeast Florida, metropolitan area, Jacksonville. When you add up the space in these metropolitan areas, and you look at how much space is available to grow food, we can grow about $2.6 billion worth of food on that space a year. The total cash receipts from Florida's vegetable farms in 2011 was $1.9 billion. That's pretty remarkable. There's a lot of potential there. Urban agriculture offers a way to increase food production without creating new agricultural land. Urban agriculture is part of a web of activity. We have indirect benefits from programs that promote urban agriculture, and they're in places you would never suspect. It reduces unsustainable uses of natural resources. So by supporting urban agriculture, you're supporting the preservation of natural resources. It conserves energy. My backyard food garden per year saved enough energy to run the average household in this country's electrical bill for an entire year. It saved enough petroleum to run my vehicle for 3 to 4 months of the year. That I could take my vehicle off the road, and it would be equivalent to taking my car off the road for 3 to 4 months a year. That's amazing. If we grew food in our metropolitan areas in the United States like this, with only 5% of our population doing it, we would be saving enough carbon dioxide emissions to be equivalent to taking 6 to 7 coal-fired power plants offline. These are the kind of conversions. This is what it really means. This is how this is all intricately interwoven, that other word too. Reduces carbon dioxide emissions, alleviates food security in communities. We have 27 food deserts in Palm Beach County. Imagine what growing food in our communities would do to alleviate those. Without food assistance programs, we wouldn't need them. Reduces the need to create new ag land from natural lands and helps to preserve wildlife habitat. So all of this is interconnected. I'm almost done. So the moral to the story, the take-home message, I hope take-home, government and community programs that support urban agriculture are very cost-effective because you're not just growing food, you're doing all this other stuff. I came up with this little graphic here, and I think this is my last slide. The last slide before the last slide. Because I got the 5-minute wave like 5 minutes ago, and I'm trying to pacify the 5-minute wave. So I'll be done in a minute. Okay, so sustainable urban agriculture connected with ecology, environment, and economics in some really interesting ways. Sustainable urban agriculture supports efforts to preserve natural lands because it takes the pressure off of us having to develop more agricultural lands in natural areas. It supports efforts to preserve biodiversity for the same reasons, but for other reasons too. My backyard food garden, I have a prairie garden next to it. Reminds me of my lost prairie back in Iowa. Between my prairie garden and my food garden, almost half of the birds that I've seen in that garden, over 35 species of birds, half of them are migratory. They spend the winter there, and they have a safe habitat. If I were to manage it improperly and use poisonous pesticides and poison the birds, they wouldn't return back up north, and their absence would affect the ecology in Canada and the northern United States just by my actions here. So we are all connected. From the environmental side, It supports protection of natural resources because we can recycle waste. We can take wastes, compostable waste that are headed out to the landfill, and we can reuse them. Reduces pollution because we're not trucking our food so many miles to eat it. Whoops, the last one. It strengthens local economies. We've seen the economic numbers, it's phenomenal. And supports food sustainability. Food sustainability is a new concept that's been emerging in the last decade, where our food systems are sustainable when they employ sustainable methods and they're based on environmentally sound methods. My book is all about food sustainability. So food for thought, this is the last slide, and I'm done. And I will turn this over to Andrew at that point. This is my backyard garden last year. Urban agriculture is an unexpected and important tool for wildlife preservation. It alleviates the need for agricultural expansion into natural habitats. It indirectly benefits to the environment. So the question is will we? Will we do it? Will we take policy there? Will we take ourselves there? Will we ask our communities to support us in these endeavors to do this? It really depends what we do in our own backyards. Thank you.
Hopefully we won't knock that over.
Yeah, let's hope not. Okay, we're good, I think.
That was great of us to put that trip hazard right there for you, John.
Thank you.
It was intended. Kristen, did we do that? That was a plan, right? Okay. Normally we're happy to take some questions for Dr. Z. For me, it's always been, are you kidding? Did you actually do that? You actually grow all that food in your own backyard? So I don't know, but somebody who has a question? David, let us have it.
Is it true that if the population of the plants as well as animals will shortly follow with the dying of the human race as well with it?
Something I wouldn't want to try and find out. We are also interconnected that when something damages the natural environment or a wild species and it is incapable of surviving, it's sort of a warning sign to us, like a canary in the coal mine.
Dr. Ramos, thank you very much for your speech. It was amazing and
Thanks.
inspiring. My question is twofold. Number one, what is your view on, I know it seems weird, but what is your view on saturated fats? And do you think that, I know you mentioned the government guidelines in terms of the food pyramid, do you think that had an effect on the agricultural, the way we started mass producing soya and crops? Do you think that had an effect on that as well?
I don't think so, because it's changed about every 5 years. And the agricultural industry would have been schizophrenic trying to keep up with the changes that have occurred to our food pyramid over the last 20 years because it has changed so much. As far as the saturated fats go, oh my gosh, what a loaded question. I grew up in a family that ate nothing but potatoes and a lot of bacon and fatty meat for their diets, but we worked hard, and we worked very hard physically, and so I had relatives that lived well up into their 80s and 90s because they were hardworking people, but they had diets that people today would think would kill somebody by the age of 40. So that's all I've got to say on that.
Yes, go ahead.
Dr. Zahina, do you take different action plans in large cities versus small cities?
I'm sorry, could the questions be repeated or might?
Yeah, we'll repeat the question.
Would action plans be different in large cities versus medium cities versus small cities?
Would action plans be different in a large city versus a medium-sized city versus a small city? And I think the answer is no, but the action plan would be different according to climate. If you were in Boston versus Louisville, Atlanta, or West Palm Beach. I think it has much more to do with climate and much less to do with city size.
In the corner?
Do you use the square foot gardening method versus the row?
I do not. Do I use the square foot gardening method or do I use rows? I use whatever I feel like when I've got the package of seed in my hand at the time. And whatever I remember worked last year, and I'm forever experimenting. This year I tore out all my raised beds. Raised beds seem to be in vogue right now, and I tore all my raised beds out because it was impossible for me to keep anything wet. And so I sunk my beds into the ground, and now everything's growing wonderfully because the water runs into the bed instead of out of the bed. So,
Have you read that book by Bill?
yes, I'm familiar with the work, and a lot of people have used that and been very successful. And it's been very helpful and beneficial for many people. Yes, very good.
John, there's something about having your website across your chin that I think
I'm going to trip on that thing again.
you have to stay here, and I'm going to stay over there.
Okay.
I have one question that I was amazed at. How many pounds of fruits and vegetables does your family consume in a year?
Oh,
What do you think? Huh?
oh my, can we pass on that?
Your trim, is it? 1,000?
Is that your mom? Oh, good. He hates vegetables. So, they're just pretty much mine.
But it's something like 1,000 pounds. You have 1,000 square feet planted in your backyard,
Last
right?
year I produced 500 pounds of fruits, 500 pounds of vegetables alone, probably 35 to 40 varieties out of that plot. The year before I included fruits and vegetables combined was 1,130 pounds. And I don't think I've come even close to the potential, maximum potential that that can produce. And I am not a wonderful great gardener. You don't see any green here, do you? Oh, wait, over here, no. I think a green thumb is nothing more than a thumb that has been hit an awful lot with the hammer of experience, and it turns green and gangrene. That's how you get a green thumb. And my gardening methods were all from Iowa. For the first few years, they all failed miserably. I had to scrap them all and relearn. So I'm probably no better of a gardener than anybody else in here could be.
Right.
So, Dr. Z, do you think that this also needs to include canning and preserving in order to really make it work?
You can. The thing about it is it doesn't necessarily have to be an either or. We don't need to rid ourselves of the commercial market system. It plays a vital role in our economy. It plays a vital role in society. We can have alternatives, and this is a wonderful alternative. I do can, but I was raised on canned food and I miss it. And the flavor is still much better than anything I can get in the store, and so that's why I do it. So preservation of some kind is important if you want to keep that all year. I canned 35 to 40 pints of tomatoes last year off of my 8 vines, and that keeps me for the year with all the tomatoes I could ever want. And I'm really and seasonality has come back into my life, and I couldn't be happier. I can't wait for tomatoes to come in season, and I can't wait for tomatoes to go out of season.
So you and Eddie are producing about a pound.
No.
You, sorry. Eddie's not a gardener.
Hates vegetables.
But you'll produce about a pound for every square foot
That's
that you have cultivated in your backyard.
That's absolutely
And
correct.
you can't eat that much in a year. Or give or take, you're basically producing all the fruits and vegetables you need
For 2 people.
for 2 people.
According to the USDA guidelines for a healthy diet of intake of 5 types of vegetables and 1 type of fruit.
I
So-
recommend you buy it for dinner.
So you're out there all day and night.
No,
How many hours are you working at this in a week?
per week, probably an hour to 2 hours per week.
Isn't that amazing? Any more questions from the back in the middle? Yep, go ahead.
Okay. Are there any cities currently in the United States that are more at the forefront of promoting urban gardening than others?
Take a guess.
California.
Yes, San Francisco, California, Portland, Oregon. They've actually created land use types within the city and zoning for urban agriculture because they promote it.
Yes.
Actually, Florida just passed a thing that where your average person can have bees in their backyard. You
Um,
produce your own honey and it doesn't matter what the city says.
That's
the state
correct.
is not protecting you.
That's right, because the regulation of bad balance is up to the state and they don't regulate it, and so therefore no community has the right to ban it. That's correct.
If they do have an inspector that stops by once a year, make
Oh.
sure it doesn't have diseases and that you haven't registered European feed.
Okay.
So that way you don't have the advertised fees.
In the back, we'll have one more question, and then I'm sure Dr. Z will
I'll go
stay.
around.
I'd like to know what he does. I have a backyard garden. I'd like to know what he does to his soil to keep it, without using a lot of fertilizers, to keep it nourished every year.
Yep, so I use organic methods only because I wanted to challenge the notion that organic gardening is not as productive as conventional. And that's why I went with organic. For 2.5 years, I was picking up waste, vegetable clippings from a cafeteria at the South Florida Water Management District where I used to work. And it's a small cafeteria, and this was the height of the Great Recession, so they weren't really producing as much as they would have during good economic times. They were only open for breakfast and lunch 5 days a week. And they were in a building on the campus of the Water Management District, which means the public didn't really go there. So it was a very limited output. I picked up over 2,000 pounds a year of scraps from them and composted it and fed it into my garden. And my garden could have taken 2 to 3 times that. It had a voracious appetite because I'm growing in pure sand. So we have an enormous potential to divert a lot of waste from the landfill into food gardens and recapture those nutrients and recycle them. So between compostable materials, and I get my hands on mulch, I also use dry organic fertilizers that are purchased. I will say that there's a couple of brands out there, I'm not touting brands, but Plant Tone is one, and Scott's has recently come out with a very nice line of organic products that work really, really well and are really well formulated. So we finally have some choices in the marketplace to buy organic fertilizers that you can feel really good about. So kudos to those companies.
We actually do talk up companies that do good environmental work, and Scott's is one of them. Scott's is supporting the zoo in a big way, both in our projects here and employees of the company volunteering and participating in the zoo. But Dr. Z, as I said, John will be around. There's going to be a book signing. We welcome everyone to stay. I think the bar will be open for a while longer, so please make yourself at home. More questions, come on up.